Alrighty, Internet, we're back again for a double feature. You see, this is my New Year's resolution, or one part of it at the very least. And it's currently the 10th, and I've got 2 videos out, so we're going to pump those numbers up. The topic of today's discussion is catalyzed by a story put forth by News Wars. If you're familiar with InfoWars, it's Alex Jones' show, and the title of that was Singer Rejects Kiss from Transgender, Gets Labeled Transphobe. One thing I thought was interesting was Microsoft didn't, underline that word. It was so progressive it didn't need help recognizing it. But InfoWars, however, is not a recognized word. The long and short of it is a celebrity talk show in the United Kingdom, and I guess there's an American songwriter I've never heard of named Ginuwine. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Probably not. And he's going through this, putting on airs of, oh yes, I support trans people and their cause, or LGBTQRSTUVWXYZ, but towards the latter part, there's a trans man there who identifies as woman and says, well, if you're virtuous, then you'll go out on a date with me, and he rejects that notion, and she further points puts this litmus test and said, oh, well, let's have a kiss then, and he rejects this as well, and then all sorts of rabble from the crowd, from Twitter and other various social medias label him as transphobe, and just another one hiding in the closet sort of deal, where they're sort of piggybacking off the movement, which is this was in Milo's book Dangerous. He talks about, I think it's TERF, it's trans-exclusive radical feminists, where if you look at a lot of these movements, like feminism for example, it's co-opted by other movements, with other means, other goals, or same means, different goals, right? And they flatly rejected this notion, and so they have a separate fringe group that I don't think anyone's heard of who hasn't read the book. Frankly, I've never heard of it before until I read Dangerous, which was a great read, by the way. I highly annotated that. Didn't get an autographed copy, though. I'm hoping to perhaps one day. So this boils down to, if anyone is at a place, whether it's university or a prestigious workplace where they use the Newspeak dictionary, that's their lingo, you should by now have heard of this term, reverse rape. And I disagree with this. I believe that reverse rape is rape, and here's why. Firstly, let's define rape. Rape is unconsensual sex, anything that requires force or coercion. No, I'm not muddying the water here like they do at what's the 1 in 5 statistic the Obama quoted that was put on by Center for Disease Control or something like that had a phone interview to see this number, or all these other highly inflated statistics you've seen where it's like, well, if the man's had a drink and the woman has it, but it's on the equinox and there's a full moon, and it's all sort of this math. Nothing like that. This is plain and simple. The use of violence or the threat of violence is a commonly occurring theme in rape. That's not the only method, the only ploy. There's also another one which I would just call the guilt trip. A little phrase would be, if you love me, you'll lie with me. Now, in the modern Newspeak dictionary, this has been converted to, if you're a good person, you'll lie with me. And I'll explain the effects of this. My first encounter with this term reverse rape would be on the web. I saw an image where it's a rather portly woman standing on a transit, I would say scantily clad, but it would be more appropriate to say hardly clad, like just in underwear with words in black written all over her about reverse rape, basically espousing this idea that if someone doesn't find me attractive, that they are in a sense raping me. And it made me think of Marxism, from each according to his ability to each according to his need. This basis of, oh, I need sex, therefore I demand it of society, and I can demand it of you because, you don't have your own volition. You don't have a conscience. You are this plebeian in this game of Marxism. I thought it was satire. It's not. But thankfully this idea has not been accepted by society at large. Not that it needs a majority, it just needs a persistent, nagging minority, as the saying goes. The premise is, from what I can tell, and I'm reading off a script if you can tell, it's half scripted, trying to improve my content. Individuals have no autonomy. You're not allowed to discriminate between people as viable sexual candidates on whether it be your whim or your own rubric of merit. And my conclusion for this is a form of sexual servitude. You have to conform to society's demands and serve every debauched strata of society in order to prove one's virtue. And obviously this stems from the body acceptance movement, so-called. It sort of, to me, goes against the evolutionary theories that have been taught, for decades in modern schooling. That would be that not hierarchy of needs, but survival of fittest via natural selection for food and other necessities, where the human species would look for a mate that is the most athletic, the most cunning, the most, has the best chance of survival, not the one that lives off EBT and, plays video games as much as I like video games and stuff like that. The most productive member of society would naturally, you'd be more inclined to than someone who is a leech of society, for lack of a better term. So this is going to be strictly an anthropological argument, because it's another one of these arguments where science is. If I could make a distinction between this generality called the right and the left, I would say that for the right, by and large, virtue is the ends. For the left, on the other hand, virtue is the means to the end. So they will use science as their cudgel. We'll speak about how science isn't, a definitive study. It is a process of rationalizing, analyzing, and it's observable, quantifiable, and reproducible, right? Three things are most vital to Descartes' method. But they'll use this cudgel of science when they're talking about, climate change, all these other things. But when you come to the body acceptance movement or healthy at every size, they flatly reject anything to do with science. Sorry, I'm just sort of tangent off here. What it requires, this reverse rape, in order to, you've probably heard this term thrown about, and it's not as if you are asked it directly, but it's almost like you imagine in some, well, for example, I read War and Peace, and the upper echelon aristocrats are looking from their box and their plays and discussing this or that person and looking at all the people, admiring them in all their glory up at the very top. And I could see them, the modern leftists, looking down at the people below, which are still well-to-do in their own right, and saying, are they an ally? It's not something they directly say, are you an ally, right? But this ally is like a tacit inquisition, like the Spanish Inquisition, right? It's not like, are you friend or foe? It's, are you willing to go along with what I have planned, or do I sort of subconsciously and invisibly earmark you for the rack? So what is to be expected with this whole reverse rape thing? Seems to me very much, obviously Marxian, and reminiscent of Atlas Shrugged, where the individual is immolated, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's one of the words where it's sort of archaic, not used anymore. I believe it's a Jewish word, or has roots in Jewish words, for a burnt offering, right? You're expected to be used and burned at the stake just to fulfill this virtue that you claim to have. And so as we know, the leftists don't really care about your virtue, only in so much as they can use it to get their own means. Because last two videos, if you've already seen them, already put me sort of on the fringe, sort of the radical. Now I'd like to advise you to read one of the best books in my mind for understanding the current political climate from a true radical, Professor Theodore Kaczynski. It is the Unabomber Manifesto, popularly known as Industrial Society and Its Future. This really, in my mind, cements the psychology behind being part of a movement, which is such a big thing now. If you're, whether it be Antifa or other groups on the right, etc., being part of a greater whole, because in all honesty, most people don't seem to have the wherewithal to produce or to create something themselves, but they feel like, oh, I'm helping, vicariously. If such and such team is on your fantasy football team and they win, by extension, you've won, That's what it's like, only it's a political game, and people's lives, their well-being are affected because the old libertarian adage that government is a monopoly of force on a geographical area. There's not a single thing that any property of government that is voluntary. It's always enforced at the end of the barrel of a gun or the heel of a boot. I think that's enough of a tangent for now. I hope you found my critique on reverse rape interesting, and make no mistake, this will come up in the future. Interesting to see what the newest version of Newspeak will say and add to it little addendums. Thank you for watching.